Today, we will be analyzing the movements and biomechanics of performing a handstand. In order to successfully show a handstand, there are a few key components of the movement using certain body parts and appropriate posture. Some of the movements include arms fully stretched at the shoulder width, legs stretched and together, and pointed feet pushing towards the ceiling, defining a straight line of the entire body. The eyes gaze at the fingers for balance, and the back is rounded with maximum shoulder extension. The pelvis should be flat with hips tucked in, engaging the core muscles. Key joints that are pertinent to the movement are the ulnocarpal joint. In order to film our analysis of the handstand, we held the camera at eye level to ensure balance and accurate portrayal of the movement. The subject had markers on her hip, knee, wrist, elbow, and ankle, demonstrating how each joint moved during the initial and final stages of the handstand.
Throughout the lunge, there are many major muscles being used. As for the dominant leg, which is using flexion in the hip, the iliopsoas is the main muscle being used. There is flexion of the knee, which the muscles being used are the semitendinosus, the semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. As for the foot, there's dorsiflexion in the front foot, and the muscles being used are the tibialis anterior, exterior digitorum longus, and the peroneus. The back leg is also showing extension in the hip, and the muscles being used for that are the gluteus maximus and the hamstrings. There is also extension of the knee, and the main muscle being used is the quadriceps.
Once the arms and trunk go into flexion, then the back leg goes into hyperextension. This is giving the body momentum to go into the handstand. The front leg then locks out, allowing the back leg to swing up into the inverted position. The main muscles used in this movement are the hip flexors, gluteus maximus, and the hamstrings.
The motion of the front leg includes flexion of the hip, flexion of the knee, and dorsiflexion of the foot. The muscles being used in this motion are the tibialis anterior, the extensor digitorum longus, and peroneus. This is what causes the dorsiflexion of the foot.
Once the back leg swings up, then the front foot's weight must shift forward. The foot must also give off enough power to swing up. The muscles being used in this movement are the abdominals, gluteus maximus, hamstrings, rectus femoris, gastrocnemius, and the extensor digitorums.
The motion of the leg includes extension of the hip and knee as well as plantar flexion of the foot. In this clip, you can see that as the back leg goes into hyperextension and then into the handstand, there is a smooth progression.
In this clip, the handstand shows a steady velocity of about 0.24 meters per second, and after a brief pause, halfway through the handstand, the velocity rapidly increases to 7.33 meters per second. This is due to the body going into flexion, and which can then cause the back leg to swing up. This is due to torque. As the upper body goes down, it causes the lower body to go up.
As mentioned before, the shoulder girdle is a crucial part of the movement. The joint torques that are responsible for the center of mass, the body is constantly adjusting into body configurations that will allow for better stability. Gravity affects the abdominal by being compressed, which causes the center of mass to be located closer to the center of gravity, which are the hands. These are the base of support. In order to attain a completely stretched position, the greatest distance possible between the hands and feet, you must fully elevate the shoulder girdle. Notice elevating the shoulder girdle provides additional stretch or length to the body. Through elevation and depression, you can see that there is a change of 4.8 centimeters in height. The muscles that are being used in this movement are the trapezius, latissimus dorsi, rhomboid major and minor, and the levator scapulae. In the wrists, when going into pronation, this uses the pronator teres and the pronator quadratus.
In a study with a combination of high experts and low experts, it showed that low experts lead their coordination with their hips, and high experts lead their coordination with wrist-shoulder coupling. This explains why the subject does not sway. The stabilization of the core is crucial, and individuals that are not activating their core muscles will sway more. If the individual toes tip backwards, in order to counteract that movement, the hips would then have to move forwards. The muscles that are involved with this movement include the abdominals, gluteus maximus, the pectorals, trapezius, levator scapulae, and the muscles that are involved with the fingers are the extensor digitorum, extensor indicis, extensor digit minimi, extensor pollicis longus, and extensor pollicis.
The center of mass is the point in the middle of an object where the weight is all equal. The forearm should be vertical above the wrist, palm and fingers flat on the floor, and the wrist goes into maximum extension. The angle of the forearm is then analyzed. When going into maximum extension, the forearm is vertical above the wrist. It is important to maintain weight over the fingers and not over the palm. This is because of anterior tilt. The angle is required in the joint to maintain a gymnast's center of mass that is above the center of the wrist joints.
Do you ever wonder why the subject's head doesn't completely tuck under? Proprioception is the cause of this and has an effect on the postural sway. Proprioceptive input from the wrist, arms, and shoulders also play a significant role in balancing the handstand. Developing the gymnast's proprioceptive feedback will allow the gymnast to identify and correct postural sway much more effectively. Vision accounts for 50% of the handstand stability. The gaze should be about 5 centimeters in front of the wrists in the space between the hands. Having the head in a completely neutral position could be disadvantageous to the gymnast.
The hands are the base support in a handstand. Bent fingers are what help stabilize the movement. The reasoning behind this is because it allows for more angle in the wrist. If the wrists are tight, someone will bend their fingers in order to get more range of motion. If the fingers are flat, less weight can be put onto them versus if they are curled. There can be more pressure put on the tips of the fingers when they are bent. When balancing, a gymnast will shift their weight between their fingers and their palms.
The wrist does not have as much torque as the ankle, which makes it harder for people to go into an inverted position. Torque is a twisting force that tends to cause rotation. The fingers are spread to create a larger base of support. This is helping with requiring more contact area. Imagine if one bar stool had a 6-inch base and there was another bar stool that has a 10-inch base. The stool with the larger base would be more stable. This idea carries over into the hands because if the fingers were together, it covers less surface area as if they were spread.
In this clip, you can see that as the subject's legs go from being inverted together to splitting apart, it causes the subject to then come out of the handstand. This occurs due to the weight of the back leg lowering below the hips, which then causes the body to shift its weight posteriorly and causes the feet to come down and the upper body to come up. If the subject wanted to keep their legs in a split while in a handstand, they should not allow either of their legs to dip below the hip.
When observing the distance between the supporting hands and feet, you will notice there is a distance of 74.55 centimeters in the starting lunge. Upon exiting the handstand, the gymnast put her foot 35.69 centimeters away from her hands. This distance is closer than her starting lunge. Because of this, the gymnast lost balance and did not step straight behind in a perfect line. When the foot landed closer to her hands, there was a smaller base of support. This caused the center of mass to be thrown off. For example, when standing a book up like a teepee, if the cover that is supporting it is closer together, the book has an increased chance of falling over versus if it is spread apart, making the base wider. This made standing back up much more difficult for the subject.
In this picture, you can see that the back foot is not aligned with the front foot. The reasoning for this happening is because the distance of the foot landing was shorter from the hands than where the footing began at the beginning of the handstand. This caused the subject to be thrown off balance when coming down, and the back leg shifted to land properly. If the subject's feet had been further away from the hands when landing, the subject may have been more aligned and would not have had to shift her weight to one side in order to keep balance.
During the hold of the inverted handstand position, the body should be approximately 180 degrees. Here, the subject holds the handstand at 175 degrees. The dynamics of this position rely heavily on the wrist, hip, and shoulder joint to stabilize the body. As we have mentioned before, wrist torque and hand splaying is extremely important in counterbalancing any sway of the body. The weight is generally exerted over the fingers rather than the palms, and the fingers are slightly flexed for pressure purposes. This method of entry allows the shoulder angle to become as close to 180 degrees as possible, and the body to be directly over the hands. An important characteristic is the rounding of the back, which provides a stabilizing effect and widens the base of support in the direction of the line of force on the posterior side.
In conclusion, this subject's handstand was successful because she is an experienced gymnast. This analysis shows the importance of the lunge, back leg extension, proprioception, experience, balance, and the muscles in order to help someone get into a handstand. The only thing that could have been perfected would be the landing, but still going forward, the mechanics of her handstand were correct. The subject has had practice on doing handstands the right way, and while doing the handstand, we did not see much sway. She was stable throughout the movement because she knew the mechanics of how to go into a handstand as well as go out of one. Another important factor was the fingers. Who would have thought that fingers would be so important? They helped keep the subject balanced, as did every other movement in the handstand. Each phase is creating better balance, such as the bent fingers, finger spread, and proprioception. There are numerous muscles that were used throughout the action. Each muscle had its own individual part to assist the movement. The center of mass played a huge role when it came to the handstand, because if the center of mass was shifted, the handstand would not stay stable.
When getting into a handstand, make sure that your trunk is flexed, your knee is flexed, and your shoulders and arms are extended. When getting into the movement, make sure there is enough momentum for the back leg to swing up, but not too much as then you would fall forward. Once in a handstand, the hands should be spread out, as well as the fingers slightly bent with the weight focused on the distal ends of the fingers. When coming out of the handstand, the back leg should be higher than the front leg to shift the balance to come down to the ground, at a distance that was the same as the initial position of the hand to foot placement.